Hello, welcome to this week's episode on the Let Me Ask You This podcast. I am your host, E.B. Hepworth, and I just want to start off this episode by saying thank you for being here. I start every single episode off by saying this, and I don't just say it just to start every episode off by saying this, but I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. I know you could be anywhere in the whole world, and you're choosing to be here and choosing to listen to this conversation, and I just don't take it lightly. And so thank you for being here and listening to this podcast. And I'm so excited about this week's guest on the podcast, and that is none other than the Tanner Olson himself. Many of you probably know him as a Written to Speak, but from the minute we started recording, I was like, this is my brother from another mother. I had such a good time recording this episode. Tanner has recently written his first child's book, All the Things I Say to God, and he had sent it to me before recording this episode, and I was so blessed by it, you guys. Oh my goodness, it's so funny. Whenever I read children's books, I'm like, are we sure this is a children's book, or was this for me, like a 33-year-old woman? It is beautiful. I know when I get it in the hands of my children, they're gonna love it. But like I said, it ministered to me. And so if you're hearing this, you have to get yourself a copy. And I felt so grateful because this was the first episode that Tanner sat down and got to talk about his book with somebody with. And so that is no light thing. And so what a joy, always a vulnerable thing to unpack something that you've been working on behind the scenes for so long. And so I just felt so grateful to be entrusted as one of the first interviews to get a chat with him about his heart for this book. And in this episode, we do talk a lot about his story, which includes things like infertility. Him and his wife adopted a beautiful baby 18 months ago, and he shares a little bit about that journey. And so I do always want to preface any episode that is framed around infertility for anyone that might be sensitive or walking in that current valley. I want you to be well aware of the episode you're listening to. And so if that's a little sensitive of a topic, then maybe check out a different episode. But I will say Tanner just breaches the topic with such grace, and so beautiful to hear the perspective from just a brother, you know what I mean? And so without further ado, here is my conversation with my new friend, Tanner Olson. Tanner Olson, do people in the wild, do they come to you and say, hey, Written to Speak? Like
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes. They will
How
say,
does that feel?
well, it feels great. I've only been, you can't, if you're listening to this, you can't see me do the air quotes for recognized, but recognized a few times. And they're like, are you Tanner? But they want to say Written to Speak. Like, I'm Tanner. I'm sorry for the confusion, but this is me. This is who I am. But it works really great for like spam mail, because I'll get like, Dear Written.
Yeah.
No, you're not real. So
that might be a future baby name waiting.
You can't come clean my office. So
That's amazing. What's the genesis of Written to Speak?
So so my backstory is I grew up wanting to be in the NBA. Hasn't happened just yet. I'm 35. It's not going to happen. But I grew up wanting to play basketball, and that never really worked out for me. When you grow to be 5'11" and have two bad knees, it's not super helpful. But so in college, I kind of shifted my focus into more of like ministry. And so I studied to be a youth leader. So I worked at camp during the summers, and I always just loved to write. I really enjoyed writing stories and poetry and all this kind of stuff. But I never thought that this could be a job. Like I knew that like I was going to be poor because of youth ministry, but it didn't,
Sure.
So I was like, I was okay with that when I switched from youth ministry to poetry. But after college, I worked a little bit, and then had a couple of full-time jobs in ministry, but the whole while I was just writing. And then I started sharing and putting stuff online. And so that was like 2013. I graduated college in 2012. And then in 2013, I started putting stuff on the internet. And it was just kind of for fun. Yeah. I enjoyed it. I chose the name Written to Speak because I didn't want it to be about me. Yeah. And now I'm like, well, that wasn't a great business move because people don't know like how to find you. They're like, is that your given name? Are you the Speaks? Like, nope, that's not how it works.
Mr. Written.
Mr. Written, which that's funny. But so I just kind of, so I chose the name Written to Speak because I'm a writer. Everything I write is really meant to be spoken. So I do a lot of spoken word poetry.
I love that.
And even when I do shows, like people are like, oh, so you like have every word memorized. Absolutely not. I have
Yeah.
too much ADHD and anxiety to memorize anything. So I'm like,
Sure.
but it's entertaining, it's engaging. But it's everything it's written to be spoken. And I think, a little bit of the name was influenced based on how letters of the Bible were shared for the first time. Is somebody had to
Mm.
speak them. Don't hear me say that the things I'm writing should be in the Bible. That's not what I'm saying. You hear that,
I
but
hear you.
it was everything it's meant to be heard and to be sat with. Like
Yeah.
um, that's kind of how I approach writing, and so the name just kind of came and
I love
rolled
that.
with it for a while, and
Oh,
now here we are.
I really want to introduce you to my husband because he's an amazing poet and a
Hmm.
total I mean, he has an ability. It's like your guys' brains work so different to be able to rhyme, be spiritually sound or biblically sound, and have it like somehow, for him, it's to a cadence of a beat.
Yeah.
And so I am like, if I were to become some type of, in fact, we named one of our children Poet because I love
No way.
poetry. Yeah. And
That's
so,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. So we love poetry. We love written word. We love hip hop. We love like,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, watching your gift and just the way it's expressed is like so beautiful. Another question I have is, did you play basketball in college?
I didn't play in college. I played
Okay.
through
Okay, so
first few
but
couple
you were
years.
raised in the church. So was it kind of one
Yeah.
of those like we choose basketball or faith? Was it like
It was never really that. It was more so of I played basketball at my Christian school growing up in
okay.
elementary and middle school, and then in high school I went to a public school and I played basketball there.
Okay.
And then it just like at some point it just wasn't I wasn't going to go where I
Sure.
wanted to
Sure.
go with
Yeah.
basketball. But it's interesting, like what basketball taught me. Like I approach work and writing the same way that I approached games
Same.
and practices and
Same.
all of that. So
Yep.
that's like there's this like different kind of work ethic. Like I
Yeah.
can't necessarily connect with some artists who are like, I've always been an artist. Like this is just how we do
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
My mentality comes to it like, well, I want to, it's this, Kobe Bryant
Me
Mamba
too.
mentality
Me
of
too.
like, I want to do
yes.
this really, really well.
Yeah.
And but while at the same time understanding uh my gifts and what God has called me to do. Like I know I can't do what this artist, this poet, this writer, like what they do or bring those gifts, but I can bring all of me forward the best way that I know how to. Um,
100%.
and so
100%.
that's kind of influenced really all. Like I wouldn't be in the position that I am right now if it wasn't for a lot of things. But I do think that if I had not grown up with basketball, I wouldn't be doing this.
I love that. I'm the same way. I played soccer throughout my whole life in
Hmm.
college, and then I wanted to go beyond that, and then it kind of came this narrow way where it was like, but quick micro story is that when I was preparing to birth the twins, my husband and I, everyone's like, "What's your biggest birthing advice? Like, what would you give?" And we just watched The Last Dance, Michael Jordan's
Oh,
documentary, on repeat
the best part of
because I
COVID.
was like,
The best part.
"Yes."
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I was like, literally, I'm like, look at what happens when you combine your God given gifts with a spiritual and a mental discipline. I'm like, and I went
Yep.
in, and all the nurses are like, what? Like, how
Why
are
are you
you? I'm
wearing a
like, dude, I
headband?
have. No, I even went into the hospital in my brand new Jordans that I got as birthing Jordans because I was like, I am made for this.
Yep.
so,
Yep.
oh, this is hilarious. Okay, well, we want to jump right in. You wrote a children's book. And so, will you share
Yes.
with readers all about kind of how this book started, where it came from?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about the book. So the book is titled "All the Things I Say to God: Learning to Pray Anytime, Anywhere." It's coming out with Zonder Kids, and it explores the profound world of prayer and shows kids that heartfelt conversations with God can occur anywhere, anytime, and about anything. It follows the story of this little girl by the name of Abby, and she just really wants to pray. Like she knows how to pray with her parents at before meals and at church, but then she goes to her mom one day and says, "Mom, can I pray to God all by myself?" And we just follow her journey. And so the whole book kind of goes back and forth between her learning something new, talking with her mom, and then being like, oh, I can do that. Can I also do this?
Yeah.
And you got to read the book. What did you think?
I loved it. And I have to tell you, my kids, I didn't let them read it because I want to hold, I got the
Yeah.
pre-order. And so I'm like, I'm going to save
Yeah.
this until they can see it in person. But Tanner, it's so great. It was so
I'm so
great.
pumped. Yeah. Yeah. It so the
Okay.
I going back, like I never planned to write a children's book. Like that's just not like I
Right.
never was like, "Oh, this is something I want to do." I mean, in my selfish brain, I was like, "Yeah, I could for sure do this." It's a lot harder than you think. But it was one of those things where like uh my wife and I, so we been married for a few years. We moved from Austin back to Nashville, Tennessee, where we live now, and we started trying to have kids, and it just didn't happen. Just we ran into all different kinds of complications. Went to the doctor that diagnosed us with unexplained infertility, which is really just the doctor's way of saying, hey, we don't know, like we don't
Yep.
have an answer for
Yep.
why this isn't happening. And then so they encouraged us to do some other things, and so we tried a couple of different things, but kind of got to the place where it's like, well, if we're going to become parents, it's either going to be by a huge surprise or through adoption. And so somehow, some way, God led us to adoption, and we started down this road, filling out paperwork and all the stuff. And when you're diagnosed with unexplained infertility, you're kind of watching the life that you thought you were going to have just change and go a different direction. So we were met with all this grief and uncertainty and frustration, and all the emotions that come with grief. Um, but we knew that adoption was the right next thing for our family. And so during this time, I just am writing. I'm writing as much as I can. That's
Yeah.
real. Like I tried to channel all the worry with
Yeah.
writing. And
Yeah.
at the time, like all of our friends, most of our friends around us were having kids. Uh,
Yeah.
my, and so I was called Mr. Tanner or Uncle Tanner. And then I thought one day, like, what do I want to give my friends' kids? Like, what could I give them? Or what do I want to teach them? And so I came up with this idea for this book because I want to teach them about how you can pray anytime, anywhere, and about anything, to
Mm.
God.
Yeah.
And so I started writing the book, and then you're writing the book while you're walking through the grief. And so there's like days I did not want to write it or think about it. And I wrote a lot of it and then let it sit for a while and then would go back to it. And then anyways,
Yeah.
long story short, it's a podcast. Every story's supposed to be long. But like eventually I was introduced to a literary agent, told him about the book. He said, yeah, let's do it. Uh, 2 months after the book contract was signed for all the things I say to God, we got a phone call that we had been chosen to be parents. So I
Oh
wrote this
my.
whole children's book before I got to be a dad. And so now our son is 15 months old. His name is Judah, and I can't wait to share the book with him. Um, I'm super excited about it. So the story is just, writing a book about prayer while being in a season where it was just hard to pray.
Yeah.
It was hard to bring the thing you wanted most to the Lord. Um, but it's just funny how all this kind of works and fits together. Um, and seeing that, you know, I wouldn't change a thing now.
A hundred
Hmm.
percent. You don't know this, but my husband and I have a very similar story. And it was just over 6 years of that same, like, we don't know what's happening. Our story, we had adopted before we found out that infertility
Mm,
was going to be a challenge. And so it's crazy how it's like, as writers, we write the message that we need desperately. And
yeah,
so that wrestling of you being like, okay, I know this message I need, but also I
yeah,
have to live it. And so, like,
yeah.
how do you steward the wrestling while also stewarding and holding truth?
Well, I think the beautiful thing about all of this is, uh, and Scripture really lays this out for us, is that we can be angry, and we can be frustrated, and we can be
Yeah.
silent before God.
Mm-hmm.
Our He's not put off by our wrestling. It's not put off by our waiting. Um, what continues to remain is the invitation to be with Him. but it is not for us to be like, we have to be a certain way. He just says, come to me.
Yeah.
And so throughout our season of grief and frustration and wondering and waiting and paperwork, um, the invitation remained the same. And I just got to show up how I was feeling and what I was going through. And there were days that were easier than others and days that were just extremely hard. Um, but we were able to show up with everything that we had and to just give it to them. And I think
Yeah.
that's what this book does really well. It's like you can anytime, anywhere, and about anything. So there were days where we didn't speak and we just sat in silence. There were days where I just asked why. There were days where I just said, I don't know. And then there were days where I said, I am so excited for whatever it is that you have for us. And I
Mm,
cannot wait to see how you're going to do what you're going to do, because I know you're going to do it. But I'm also really tired of waiting,
yeah. Yeah.
and the feeling that you are behind or something is wrong with your body, all of the emotions that just come with the uncertainty. And um, you see other people and you're like, well, why can't I just have that? Why can't I?
Yes.
Well, that looks pretty easy for them. Or you go to church on Sunday and it's like everyone around you. I remember one Sunday, it was like Kid Central
Yeah.
all over the place.
Just
And
everywhere.
the guy who was doing like the announcements was like, there's got to be something in the water. And I
Yeah.
was like, not in everyone's cup, like, no way, buddy. But I was just like, so you just kind of, there's just all these emotions and frustrations. But one of the things that, as we see throughout scripture, especially like in the Psalms, like we're allowed to lament, we're allowed to be frustrated, we're allowed to be sad. The invitation remains the same, and so does his faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And but it doesn't necessarily make it easier.
Yeah.
The hard
Yeah.
stuff is still hard,
Yeah.
but knowing that you're not alone in it makes it a little bit easier.
Well, and I think of those journeys, like, you say you wouldn't change anything. And it's like,
Hmm.
obviously, everyone's rolling their eyes that's in the middle of that season now because it's easy to say on
Oh
the other side, right? You're like,
yeah,
can you just
yeah.
not?
Hmm.
But I'm thinking about like what that always reveals in those seasons. Like I
Hmm.
just remember there's something about a delayed dream, or even an unanswered prayer
Hmm.
that will purify. And you're like, whew, I am holding the dream so much closer than him. And
Yeah.
it's that surface level faith that gets
Hmm.
exposed of like, man, Lord, far be it from me
Yeah.
to like look to your hand before your face. And it purifies your faith.
Hmm.
And so not only is it inviting this honesty that leads and reaches into deeper intimacy, but it exposes the flesh within you that you're just, whew, for 1 second I was just bowing to the fantasy of what I wanted my life to look like versus
Yeah.
the life he's asked me to call or to live.
And that gets so hard when the thing that you want is a good thing
Oh, come
and a
on, go
beautiful
there,
thing.
go there.
And that, so we get to talk to a lot of couples who are going through infertility. And
Yeah.
I mean, just the other week, we sat across from a couple who was where we were 3 years earlier. And after the conversation, my wife and I we were extremely sad for them because we remember what it was like to sit there, but we were so
Yes.
thankful to be on the other side of it. And it's
Yes.
good to know that there is another side of it. And so as we were going through it, like I deep down believed that something more was happening than I could see. I knew it, but it is so hard when you're in it. And I don't know if it's okay for me to say, but like, you can let the hard thing be the hard thing. You don't have to try to make the hard thing not be hard or to pretend like it's not easy. The hard thing with
Totally.
grief is that you often feel like you're the only one who gets to hold it. And there are a lot of people who you have to invite other people into your grief. When life is full of joy, like it's easy for people to invite that. Joy is a party. Grief is a gathering, right? And so we just got to come together around those people and help care for them, and you know tell them what's true, that everything will be okay even if everything isn't okay today, while at the same time understanding that today sucks.
Yeah.
And
Today sucks.
yeah, like just say it
Tanner
as it
Olson's
is.
Tanner Olson's next book, Today Sucks.
Oh yeah, I'd love to write that book. Yeah.
I will co-write it because yeah, been there.
But that's just it's I mean when you're in the middle, when you're in the messy middle,
Yeah.
it is so hard to think that things can and will get better. And I know that not every story, well, actually, I know every story ends with meeting Jesus. So that's the good news. However, on earth, when you were like, is it gonna get better? And it might get worse, it might get harder, but I mean, the truth remains, goodness remains, hope, it all remains.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It's
I think of the way that season and life's suffering, it tethers us to Christ, right? And so all of a sudden your humanity is so like that's why you hear people that come to faith because they're praying for a miracle, because the
yeah.
humanity is so they're so aware that they're like,
Hmm.
oh, maybe Jesus can come in and redeem or heal or restore. And I just, oh my gosh, I just think so often how much it's just this crucible, and it forges this deep faith of like,
Hmm.
all right, Lord,
Oh
even
yeah.
if, you know,
Oh yeah. Well, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well, but being on the other side of it and then preparing to step into something new, or to into another hard thing, like you're stepping into it just a little bit differently. It kind of goes
yeah,
back to what we were talking about earlier with like sports. Like you
yes,
know what it's like to get knocked down, you know what it's like to lose, you know what it's like to not go through something the way that you want to go through it. And then when it comes back in life again, like I know that my wife and I, that Sarah and I, that when we, whatever we step into next, we're stepping into it differently.
yeah,
Like the grief, it shapes you, it changes you, but so does the goodness of God. Um,
100%.
and so
Oh,
you're carrying that forward. And I mean, yes, we get to invite, we are invited by God, but we also get to invite him into this as well, you
yeah.
know? And I think, if looking back on it, it's kind of like looking back on the pandemic. We're like, wow, I probably would have done this differently. Maybe I wouldn't have just eaten moose tracks every night.
More
Maybe I would have.
sourdough.
Oh yeah, well, I wouldn't take that back. But but like you're like, I would have done it differently. And
Yeah,
like, well, the good news is there's grace, but also like we know life is just going to continue to be heavy and hard, and sometimes all the things that we don't want it to be. And so we get to step into it with a strengthened and renewed faith, and also at the same time, like you're gonna get to be with people who've gone through what you went
yeah,
through. Like you're gonna get to walk alongside others and speak their language. When we met couples who were going through infertility, it made the heaviness lighter. uh I can't really explain it, but it's just like the unspoken me too.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you just know that you're in a same area of grief and pain, while really trying to hold on to hope,
yeah.
knowing that hope holds on to you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I have this little button where I click it every time you say a mic drop thing, and I've clicked it 20 times so far. I'm like, just, you're preaching. I mean, while you were talking, what came to mind was this concept of like, it's the kindness of God that he had scars even after he
Mhm.
resurrected. And I just
Oh
think of the
yeah.
way our scars tell these stories of like, hey, the victory, like that, this is proof that death won. But the reason that you're able to come and feel this, Tom, is because I'm alive now. And so like
Yeah.
the way that our scars of what we've get to bear witness to is like, oh, man, it's wild. It's
It is. It is one of the things that we joked about when we were first diagnosed with unexplained infertility.
Which
I
you
was just
have
like,
to joke so then you don't cry. Like there
oh
has to be
yeah. Well, no,
comic
I do.
relief.
I just do both all the time. It's either I'm laughing or I'm crying. But it's I was like, man, Sarah, for the rest of our lives, this is going to be part of our story. Like we're always going to be talking about unexplained infertility, and at the very beginning of our journey, I was so bummed about that, and now I'm like, who wants to talk about it?
Yeah, me
Because
too.
I know that when I talk about it, like I know that it gets to point to something so much better and more beautiful. And
Yes.
like that's like the for the people who are going through the hard stuff, like
Yeah.
your story gets to share a
You
greater
got to hand
story.
a lantern to them that says, hey, I've been
Yeah,
in the dark. Go this way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
It's
just think
quite the ride.
also
Mm,
how funny. I'm thinking of all the super spiritual people because my real name is Elizabeth. That's where
hmm.
Evie comes from. And I'm thinking of all the people that went to Sarah and they're like, but your name is a prophetic declaration. Because people did that to me left and
Oh,
right. They're like, you were intentionally named Elizabeth and you will. So, can
yep.
you speak to the people with great intentions, and I never question their hearts, but when somebody hands you a band-aid for a gaping wound of maybe I don't know what we want to call it, maybe synthetic encouragement, maybe to them it's very genuine.
Hmm.
What do you do with that?
I have the great honor of getting able to speak to a lot of different places in a lot of different places to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And you never know what someone is going to come up to you and say afterwards. And the
Totally.
number of times people have come up to me and said, like, hey, don't give up. Like, you guys are going to have your own kids one day. Or they'll tell me the story of, I had friends who they couldn't get pregnant and then they adopted. And then right after that, they got
Oh,
pregnant.
if I had a dollar, Tanner.
We would be rich. I'm like, well, statistically, it's like 5% of people who that actually happens for. So thanks for sharing that. But I've gotten to the point now where people are going to say what they're going to say. You cannot, you don't get to coach everybody. It's not also your position to coach everybody. Sometimes people just need to say what they want to say.
Totally.
We have our people who we
Yeah.
go to for when they to
Yeah.
speak truth and life and encouragement into us.
Yeah.
But for those people who are just like who want like I just all right, I'll let I just talked for 30 minutes on stage. You could talk forever, however
Yeah.
long you want to talk over here while I'm trying to get you to buy one of my books. Like it's totally fine. But I mean people they mean so we all mean well. But
Yeah.
sometimes the things that we say are they're not they're not helpful. They just kind of put people back in their space. And I
Hmm.
think the best thing that what we get to offer to other people is when we hear their story to say thank you for sharing. I'm sorry that's so hard. That must have been
Hmm.
so hard. Um, I'm so happy for where you guys are at now.
Yeah.
Because when people want to tell me this is what's going to happen in my life, I thank you for that.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right, but people have told me a lot of things,
Yeah.
and in this, our house is still 1,200 square feet. That's all I'm
Yeah.
going to say. So I don't know if that answered your
Oh,
question. I kind of got
that
lost in my own
totally does.
words.
No, that's so good. I just, um, I am even thinking of your book. I'm so excited for people to read this, but I'm even thinking, how many times have I been on that side of saying something that years later I'm like, oh
Mm.
gosh, dang it, why did I say that?
Yeah.
But then it's even an invitation, whatever side you're on in those kinds of scenarios, to then go to Jesus, right, and be
Hmm.
like, hey, um, Jesus, I want to talk to you about this. And I think that's like, I just the heartbeat of so much of obviously this
Yeah.
book is just a constant unending dialogue of abiding and just and finding him as my friend. Like that was one of my favorite things about this was it's like, wow,
Hmm.
this really reflects the friendship of God.
Yeah. And it's this whole like anytime, anywhere. Like it's
Yeah.
just you get to be with the one who called you to be.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. And I mean, especially when you're going through the hard stuff and the difficult things, or even just like, today in Nashville, it is disgusting. It is rainy and gloomy,
Oh,
but what a time it is just to sit and to be,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So
In all the seasons. Yeah. Well,
all
tell
the
me
seasons.
about well, our best friends are in Nashville, by the way.
Hmm.
So, and they adopted a baby, um, a sweet baby, similar story actually to you guys. And I want to say she just turned 1 in January. So you guys might need to link up, and then
Yeah.
Sarah might,
After this,
yeah.
let me know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Sarah
That'd be great.
and my best friend would just, yeah. But I want to know how is it different from writing poetry compared to writing a children's book?
Oh, it's so different.
Yeah. Yeah,
Writing a
just
kids
creative.
writing a children's book was a real trip. And thankfully, like I had some really good help on it to help the words sound better. But I had my idea for this book. It probably had like 10 different versions. And there
Oh,
was one where it was like, so the book is about 750 words, 750 words, which is kind of longer for a children's book. So it's like
sure.
but like usually it's like around 500 to 700 words, which I mean, I've been on this pod. We've been talking for about a half hour. You know that's hard for me to put something into 500 words. But the part of it is you're not just writing the words, but you're also keeping in mind what the pictures are going to tell. So you're telling a story with words, the illustrator's telling the story with pictures. And so sometimes that gets rid of some of the words. And so it
Sure.
kind of helps out there. But writing it was this back and forth of um, me and the editors, and were just so kind and like, I really want to say this. But like, what if we said it like this? I'm like, well, what if we also said it like this? Like, let's go with that. So
Yeah.
it's it's a team
Yeah.
effort. It was so great because for the most part, when I'm writing poetry, it's really just me.
Yeah.
I have 4 books of poetry out. Many of them were just self-published, and so I got full control of like it's going to be like this.
Totally.
But writing this book, working with the Zonder Kids team, was a real gift, and to be able to collaborate together on something so special and meaningful. Like there's no way I could have done this on my own. The illustrations are amazing, and um, the way that the book just kind of came to be was everything I wanted it to be and more. So
Well, I don't.
writing poetry is just very different.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Just well, I mean,
It's like
you're
me
talking.
speaking into the wall, being like, "Well, okay, that rhymed again, but you've already rhymed light with night 19 times today. Change it up."
But in a way, it feels like it would be in a similar thread in the sense of
Yeah.
similar parts of the brain, right?
Hmm.
Um, but something else is I don't even remember when I read it. Who did you dedicate it to?
So it's for all the kids who call me Uncle Tanner, Mister Tanner, and
Oh,
Dad. So yeah, we had the dedication like down long ago, and it was
come
just the
on.
first two, and then we got to add Dad to it, and I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna be a puddle of tears
Puddle
forever.
forever.
You know,
Yeah.
it's so fun to. I'm really looking forward to sitting down with all of my kids' friends, and they're all about 4, 5, 6, 7 now
Right.
because we wrote
Yeah.
the book a while ago.
Yeah.
But to sit and to read it with them and be like, well, I was thinking of you when I wrote this. And then
Yeah.
later on, we'll tell Judah, be like, the book was already written when you arrived. Sorry, buddy.
Isn't that wild?
That's why it's about a
That's
little girl,
but but that's its own thing. Like
Hmm.
that's crazy to me. Just the kindness of God that he's like, I'm doing this thing in Tanner at this moment, not just for Tanner. And so it breeds this purpose and this
Hmm.
preciousness to like it it's not about you. He's with it in
No.
you and he loves you, but he's like, this is so much more than just my son, Tanner.
Hmm.
This is about all that like and even just obviously the heartbeat of the message and the way that kids are going to be able to openly converse with their maker because of something that you created, you know?
Yeah. And for family, one of my favorite parts of what this book will hopefully do is that it just allows parents to pray with their kids and encourage their kids to set this rhythm and routine of praying day after day. And the prayers of children are the most beautiful things. Like the poems that kids write, the best poems you'll ever read. The prayers that
100%.
they pray, the most honest, genuine, loving prayers you'll ever hear.
Yeah.
And they're teaching us how to pray. So if the parents read this book with their kids and the kids start praying, it's going to change everything for that family. I mean, we know
100%.
how powerful prayer is and just how beautiful it can be. It's going to change hearts. It's going to change minds. It's going to change it all. I mean, it's just, this is the thing that I will be for a long time, be the most proud of. Um,
Oh, I
so
mean,
I'm so happy with how it turned out. Also, I should say, this is my first interview talking about the book. I'm not
is
talking to,
it?
so that's why I'm like
Are
going
you
on and on and
kidding?
on. This is the first
Oh,
one. Yeah,
wow. I feel so honored. I'm assuming you've had like 50 and you just like have your
absolutely
things you
not.
say.
Nope, this is the first. Could be the last, so we'll never know. But
Yeah, right. Are you kidding? Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Well, what's so funny is as you're talking, the creative side of my brain is like I honestly think this is probably the first of many children's books because I'm thinking of doing talking to God about grief, talking to God
Hmm.
about joy, talking to God, and I'm just
Yeah.
imagining all the different creative things that I've seen you produce and the way that it's just like this translates to all of those things. But I think Tanner that there's a lot under this umbrella.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just so excited. I keep saying I'm so excited. People listen to this, be like, this guy's just really excited. Uh, but what I was going to say earlier is there's this to be where we're at now. I think that there's very important and beautiful the spiritual practice of just looking back,
yeah,
and thinking back to, okay, where were we in 2019 and 2020 and 2021, and then stepping into the adoption and to see where we are now. But to look back and just to be like, oh, God was with us there, and He was with us
yeah,
there, and He's with us there, and if He was with us there, He's going to be with us here, and He's going to be
yeah.
with us again wherever we go.
Yeah.
You know, it
Yeah.
is this, uh, e- every day is this invitation to look back and to see how kind God has been. And every day is an invitation to take another step forward, knowing that his kindness is constant.
Yeah. So good. I think the way we hold our shattered dreams in
Mm-hmm.
seasons, or chapters, if you will, of just ache and longing, it
Mm-hmm.
changes the way you hold just your reality, right? Because and like when you do come on the other side, but I'm thinking about the people in this conversation that are not on the other side. Um,
Yeah.
and so for people that are just like, man, I am holding nothing but shattered dreams. All I am swimming in since I've followed this savior is just reoccurring unanswered prayers. And so, what would you say to the person that hasn't felt that relief that we ache for as humans? Like, how do people hold on to hope when their reality shows differently?
Yeah. Well, if I was sitting across from them and they told me that, what I would tell them is that I hate this for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's anything else that I would feel the need to say, because I know what it was like. And you know what it was like to be in that situation when hope felt far and the lies were loud and it was just the heaviest of the heavy. And to also feel like nobody saw you for what you were going through.
Mm.
The number of times people tried to explain away my my feelings or my grief.
Your sorrow.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but when people said to me like, "Man, this is terrible." There sometimes isn't anything else that you can say,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
least not in that same sentence.
Yeah.
So my response is always, I hate this for you,
Yeah.
because the thing that you want is a good thing. Yeah, I know that you're seeing other people get the answer to your prayers, and that sucks. And
Yeah.
I hate that for you.
Yeah.
And then maybe after we have a little bit more coffee or we order something to the table, I would do my very best to remind them that hope does not let the story end,
Yeah.
that good is on the way, that you've
Yeah.
not been forgotten. I would say, uh, I would try to tell them without sounding too teachy or preachy that life isn't a race and you're not behind.
Mm.
And I would tell them that I'm with them in this and that their savior is too. And I would just say, well, see how this keeps going. And we're going to keep talking about it, because I can't tell them it's going to work out the way that you want it to work out, because
Yeah.
that wouldn't be fair to them, because maybe the way that they want it to work out isn't the best way.
Yeah.
Because people would tell us like, well, you're going to have kids one day.
Yeah.
Be like, okay, they didn't know how. They
Yeah.
didn't see that. And so I don't know, to sit with them in that and to not. So for anyone who's listening, whatever you're going through, I think it's fair to say that I hate this for you.
Yeah.
And you're not forgotten. God still hears your prayers,
Yeah.
and keep praying. And then, I mean, we were going through it. Like, I had a hard time praying, so I'd ask other people to pray for me.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I mean, I was just it was so heavy, so
Yeah.
hard. And to invite other people into it is all like, and that's the thing, is when life is hard, you're asked to do so many hard things. It's not like life is really hard right now. Here, let's make it easier.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's like everything is hard. Everything
Yes.
gets harder. And so to have the people around you that you can talk with, who can pray for you, who can check in on you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just people that are weeping with you. I think of the garden, right? And Jesus brought in his three closest
Hmm.
homies and he's like,
Yeah.
keep watch. And what do? They fall asleep, but just that
Yeah.
there's something in that moment where I sometimes I'm like, I wonder if they fell asleep because it had to purge out that prayer of like, your will, but not mine. Like my flesh
Mm.
is weak, but my spirit is willing. Like there's something even about when your homies maybe don't know what to say.
Hmm.
Um, but it purges out some deeper prayer, and it's just you know that unseen hope that the Bible's always talking about. It's that
Hmm.
like that Jesus speaks the same dialect of pain that you're feeling right now because he was fully man and fully God, and just
Hmm.
being able to sit in that tension. It's like the hardest place of faith
Yeah.
like you said, especially when it's something so good, right? And it
Yeah.
feels like it rains when it pours. You're like, not only are we infertile, but we just got a bill for 5K. Great.
Well,
What's
yeah,
that
that
about,
was really
Lord?
fun. I thought you said you didn't know. You get to
Yeah.
give me.
Yeah. And you're like, come on, God, like
Yeah.
you're going to make me physically pay for this tragedy,
Yeah.
And so, and I just, it's so crazy. I'm going back to what you said about looking back, but the history of how those prayers shaped my honesty with God,
Hmm.
it sculpted so much of my faith because in that season, nothing was off limits. I'm like,
Yeah.
hold up. Why did I think when you said follow me that I thought that was congruent with my dreams? Talk me through that one,
Yeah.
God, and then he'll
Yep.
start. And that's the
Yep.
thing is when you ask him questions, what I love about in your book, no questions off limits. And guess what? He has something to say about all of our
Yeah.
questions. And
Hmm.
so finding in seasons of wilderness or seasons of barrenness, if you will, of being like, I know that there's something he's scribing on my heart that I can use to just be a weapon, a sword. And so
Yeah.
finding not only this community, but finding those scriptures that you're like, I'm staking my life on this. I
Hmm.
believe he died and rose again, and so I'm staking my life on this truth that he's going to
Hmm.
be with me you know
Yeah. And that's it. And it's just this day by day
day
struggling
by day.
forward. And it is not easy to be a human being. It is a
Dude,
hard thing to be a human being.
brutal.
It is just rough. But I mean, if hope is the full assurance that God is with us in whatever we are going through, uh, then we are going to be able to make it through. There's the Emily Dickinson has a poem where it's like hope is this thing
The
with
thing with
feathers.
wings.
And
Yeah.
it's like this is really beautiful and all,
Yeah.
but so then I heard this story about these wolves. Do you know? Have you heard? Okay, let me say more before I ask you. Do you know what I'm talking about? But there's wolves in Yellowstone National Park, right? And so this was like early 1900s, and the wolves were just being wolves, and people were like, we got to get the wolves out of Yellowstone National Park. So they get all the wolves out, and then they start to see the ecosystem just begins to change. Like they're seeing less and less trees, like water's drying out. They're seeing an increase in elk, which is not a good thing,
Yeah.
right? And so they're like, well, we got to change things. So they put the wolves back in, and like 1995, they put
Yes, I'm
wolves back.
remembering this.
They put them back, and then
Yeah.
everything begins to change. Like the ecosystem returns, rivers. There's like new rivers. Like there's the decreased population of elk, and like I love that. Emily Dickens says like hope is this thing with feathers, but hope is not. It is not soft. It
Yeah.
is not. Hope is fierce.
Yeah.
It is. It is a fierce thing, and hope renews. Hope restores. Hope revives.
Yeah.
Hope
Yeah.
is not soft. Hope is not fragile.
Yeah.
It is.
And I think it's
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 fierce.
the bridge to faith. You can't have faith apart from hope, right? And
Yeah.
if faith is the love language of heaven, then I think hope is what opens the door for that, right?
Yeah. And also hope and waiting go hand in hand. Like you can't
100%.
have one without the other. So
100%.
like if you're in the hard stuff, and
Yeah.
I know people are listening who they're in the hard stuff, like that's where hope is too. And
$100%.
hope is not this rude thing, that we
Yeah.
think of. It's like hope reads the room.
Yeah.
It's not telling you, it's not being like everything's gonna be fine. It doesn't
So
say
good.
that. It's not, it's like hope would say that this is really terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it do-
Hope
it
is,
doesn't
yeah.
it doesn't leave you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. You really are a walking poet, aren't you? That's
Well,
so
it's
good.
part of the job. It's
Part
part
of
of the
the job.
job.
So right before we started recording, I'm preparing a message super last minute that I was invited to come and share. I'm leaving in the morning to go to Dallas. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to share? And he talks about hope. And so I'm doing some look into Hebrews, and I'm trying to break down, okay, these verses on hope and Romans. And I'm like, and I found that one of the Hebrew makeups, the original first time hope is used in scripture was in regards, well, first off, the picture in Hebrew for hope is a
Mm.
3-corded rope, which I
Yeah.
just think is like so beautiful. And the first time it's recorded was when Rahab throws it out to, share about her salvation. And I was just thinking so much about this. I think sometimes we think hope is this like fierce horse that's gonna just like, or just the, there's a lot of different dialects of it, I think. But just today, because this is fresh on my mind, I'm like, dang, this concept of hope as a rope, and just that the tension is what allows
Mm-hmm.
it to be rescuing me from my pit of despair and my pit of disappointment. Like
Mm-hmm.
and it's not even my ability to hold on to it. It's its ability to hold me, and letting
Yeah.
that like
Mm-hmm. Let it be a gift.
it
Yeah.
takes off the striving of being like, oh, I want to hope for the sake of hoping, or
Yeah.
it's like, no, I want to hope because I want to know Christ deeper. And
Yeah. That's
yeah.
good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Tanner, where can people find your book, and where can they find you?
Yeah. If you just type in Tanner Olson, Olson, I will probably come up. Or you can go to
Okay.
writtentospeak.com, or just Google the book, All the Things I Say to God. If you pre-order the book, because it comes out April 29th. I don't know when
I
this
was just
episode's
going to
going to air.
ask. Okay. April 29th.
Yeah, whenever you want to air, it's fine. But if the book comes out, and I'd love it if you got a copy. I've always had a hard time with with the self promotion of
Oh,
anytime I
yeah.
raise them. But
Yeah.
with this book, I'm like, you actually need this
You
book.
need
Like, this one's
this. Yeah.
really
You
good. Like,
need.
I know you're gonna buy books for little kids and for people who are expecting, or for if you're a grandma. Like, this is the book. Just put this number
This is
one
the
or
book you
two,
need.
but get
Yeah.
it. Like
100%.
I am. And part of it is that it's the illustrations in it are so fun and whimsical, and like I don't know. I am so excited and proud of this book, and I
Yeah.
don't know if I've been able to say that with other projects. 'Cause I've been like, no, like if it's for you, maybe this one's for you.
Sure.
All right,
Sure.
don't get my
Yeah.
books, get the. So, but
Well,
yeah,
it's
and then
cool. I think there's just so much excitement around. There's something to say when you see an offering that you've done with Jesus, and then you're like, dang, like
just
I'm proud of this,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
And I
I
mean, and
respect that.
this book's been done for a while. We've just been waiting to put it
Right.
out at the right
Isn't that
time,
the
and I'm
funny
just like,
thing? How
let's get
people
it
don't
going.
know. People are like, you wrote this 2 years ago. People don't know
Oh
that. And
yeah,
so
oh
they think it's like
yeah.
fresh off the press of your heart. No,
No way, buddy. This one's been sitting here for a bit. Like, I've been ready to talk about this, you
totally.
know. And they're like,
Oh
yeah. So
gosh.
it's been so fun. I'm so excited. I'm so thankful to Zonder Kids, and for you to have me on your
Are
show.
you kidding? A no-brainer. I told you, Tanner is so legit, and what a joy of a human. And like we said, make sure you go and find him on Instagram. And more importantly, go on Amazon, look up All the Things I Say to God, and pre-order this children's book. Authors don't always come forthright, and they're not always super direct with and just stating the importance of pre-orders, but pre-orders are everything for authors. And so go and get it. Your kids are going to love it. Your nieces and nephews are going to love it. You're going to love it. Truly such a great, great investment. And like always, if you have an extra second, it would mean so much if you rated this episode on whatever platform you're streaming it on, or if you share all of our content that we are sharing it on Instagram or TikTok, whatever it may be. It does help this content get into the ears of more people, which is such a gift. And so thank you for listening to the last hour of the Let Me Ask You This podcast. We will see you next week.